Hello, fabulous humans. I'm Susan, and I'm here today to talk to you about prayer beads and how you might use them in an Atheopagan context. So, prayer beads are something you might have encountered in your life. They range from things like rosaries in a Christian context to things like Tibetan prayer beads or the mala in Eastern traditions. And what they boil down to is a marker system so that if you are saying prayers or meditations or chants or doing breath work, you can physically mark off each prayer or breath or whatever it is you're trying to practice on these beads without having to keep track mentally of, okay, did I say that one 6 times? Am I on 7? Or are we 8? How much farther do I have to go? You can physically feel that with your eyes closed or open or however you are practicing, and know that when you come to a bead that's different, to either stop, say a different prayer, whatever it is that you're doing, or to engage differently with the beads some other way, however you choose. So that's how you might traditionally use them in a religious context. So how does that translate to Atheopaganism? You can still use them for prayers. I will use scare quotes for prayers. I personally have developed some what I'll call prayers, for lack of a better word, and for ease of communication with people who are familiar with those terms. It's really more about intention setting, or you might think of it as an affirmation, things like that. So what I'll do is I will, say maybe a short one for each of these smaller beads over and over again. I personally wouldn't want to get too long with it, or I'm going to get distracted regardless of the beads. And then maybe when I get to a different textured bead, or one of a different size, maybe I'll say a longer prayer, or take a deep breath, or maybe just stop, because you don't have to use the whole set of beads each time you engage with it. So that's one way that you might engage with them as an Atheopagan. Some other things that I have found these useful for, though, is for one, a fidget toy. As you can see with it, watching the video right now, I'm playing with this a lot, and having something with me, it makes it kind of akin to a worry stone, or just any kind of fidget toy. I have this ring here that I play with a lot too, so you can use it for that. Or a lot of the time, and a lot of the use and joy I have gotten from these beads is using them as a comfort item. So I did not grow up in a religious context, and so I find it very stressful to be in churches, because, as somebody coming from the outside, especially when I was younger, it felt very weird. It felt very scary. I didn't understand what was going on. So I just have this kind of negative association and bodily reaction to being in a church. And this kind of helps me calm down, kind of helps me remind me of what my beliefs are. And that is especially helpful when I'm in a context where I don't really agree with how things are being presented in a church, particularly at weddings and funerals, which is when I mostly find myself at churches for family members, where one, the emphasis is not on the individuals being celebrated or remembered, and also a lot of the time at those kinds of events, the politics of the church in question can come up, and that can be really uncomfortable for me, and I'm sure a lot of you as well. So having this with me gives me something else to focus on. I can either say my prayers or just have it with me as a comfort item when I'm in a context like that that's uncomfortable for me. And it doesn't have to be a church that, brings you discomfort. Whatever it is that you kind of want a little bit of extra comfort and something to have with you, like a worry stone. These can be really helpful. At least they have been for me. So those are some options. A last option I want to talk about for using prayer beads is as a memorization tool. And this kind of is a little bit like what I talked about at the beginning with intention setting. But I have set up my set of beads so that this main ring sort of represents the wheel of the year. Now, I will say that this set of beads is set up in a Druid context. So it is useful for a particular ritual practice that I use in my druidry, which is why the tail is important. But for the main ring, I also use this in an Atheopagan context for the Wheel of the Year and celebrating the 4 sacred pillars and the 13 principles. So I have here my air, fire, water, earth stones with the various colors, and those for me represent the solstices and equinoxes of the year, and also the 4 sacred pillars, which I've assigned one to each quarter of the year. And in between, I have 13 stones. I have 2 sets of 6 turquoise, and then a hematite in the middle point, which is a stone that's particularly meaningful for me. It's sort of what I use as my representation of myself. So there's 13 weeks in each quarter of the year, adding up to 52, and this matches up well with the 13 principles. So I can use this kind of as a marker of going through each principle if I want to, and work on the memorization of the principles, or just intention setting and a reminder and a meditative practice about each of the principles and the 4 sacred pillars. So those are some ways that you might use it. This has been set up particularly in that fashion so that I can use it for that, because I made this one myself. If you buy prayer beads, you're likely to have a totally different, set of patterns and numbers and groupings and things like that. So it's one of the reasons I encourage you to make your own, because you can set it up however you want in a way that's meaningful to you, just as I have, and you can incorporate whatever kind of symbology is important to you. So here I have an awen, which is a druid symbol. You could put on the Atheopagan sun tree if that's something you want for your Atheopagan beads. You could put on a nautilus. You could put on whatever is meaningful to you to have as a reminder or to incorporate into your practice. So if you wanted to do this yourself, how would you go about doing that? Really all you need are beads and a cord and some beading needles. Now, you have pretty much a ton of options with this. You can get whatever cording you want. Just make sure that it is the right size for your beads. Many beads come with a standard 1 millimeter size hole. So the cording I have here is a 0.8 millimeter cording. And what I've purchased, I really like this. Here's the packaging so you can see the brand. Mine happens to be natural silk. You can get whatever you want. You can use plastic, you can use hemp, you can use cotton, you can use whatever it is you want, elastic if you want it to be something stretchy that you just put on your wrist. It's up to you. I have chosen this because it was important to me not to have plastic in my prayer beads, but also because this comes with a needle. I use the term needle loosely. This is really just a strand of wire already attached to the cording. And it's just the right size and it's a good texture for making these knots that I've made in between beads. Now I have chosen to knot in between each bead so that it has a particular way of moving that I find really appealing to me. You don't have to do that. You could use a tiny little, what are called seed beads, which are the itty bitty bitty ones, kind of like these little ones here in between. Or you can just leave them, let them touch. It's up to you, however you want to do it. So all you really need is cording that is the right size for your beads, and you need beads. Now I have some wooden beads here, and I have some gemstones. And I don't, you can never be really sure, 100% sure, but I did my best to research online and find a company where I felt reasonably confident that the miners, the craftspeople, were being treated fairly and paid a fair wage, and that the environmental impacts were going to be minimal. So I am not going to stand here and judge anybody for whatever choices you want to make for your beads. If you want to do plastic, if that's what's available to you, if that's what's meaningful to you, if you're not able to, have certain resources available to you. I understand. I'm not here to judge anybody, but I do want to just put a plug out there for please do your research and try to make sure that you're not hurting anybody or the planet by your purchases for these, because especially with gemstones, there's a lot of, and in today's age with crystals, for example, being as popular as they are, there's a lot of stuff out there that is really harmful to a lot of people and to the planet. Now, any purchases that we make obviously is going to impact somebody somewhere and impact the planet somewhere. So please just be mindful of that impact when you go out and try to make and start making these choices. So I did the best I could. Obviously, I'm not perfect. Nobody's going to be, but that's my my little spiel for trying to be as minimally impactful as you can. So all you really need are those 3 sets of things. I did want to show you, if you don't have this cord with this little wire here, you can get something called purling needles or beading needles. They're very, very skinny. You can get these just at any craft store, and just make sure that they're nice and thin. And the other thing I want to mention is, do check your beads. Like I said, most beads are going to have a standard 1 millimeter hole, but some of them do not. This is my second set of prayer beads, and the first set I had a lot of problems with because most of my beads had the standard hole, but some of them I was trying to use did not. They were pearls and they were very, very, very tiny holes. So I had to use a very, very small thread to incorporate those. So when I tried to make these knots, even after I made the knot, it was so small it would still slide through the bead. So that's just something to be aware of as you're going about it, and really just have fun with it. It took me maybe a couple of afternoons of thinking about it to decide on the placement that I wanted, what sets of numbers were important to me, what items I wanted on the ends. Etsy is a good resource for this. This is from a small craftsperson, and it was a really fun process, and it's a really nice way to make sure that the final product is something that's going to be meaningful to you and that you're going to use. So and doing it, the process of doing it, was a nice little mindful exercise. So I hope that you enjoyed watching my video. I hope you're inspired to make something meaningful to you that you can carry with you and use in times of comfort and in times of discomfort to bring you joy, and maybe add this to your practice as something meaningful for you. And thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again soon.